Let's jump to the story from USA 9. Cory Griffin barred from public office for insurrectionary conduct. A New Mexico judge ruled Cory Griffin was disqualified from holding office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So they finally got one. They have been trying, Democrats, to get people barred from holding office under the 14th Amendment for being insurrection, for insurrection. And now a judge has actually done it, is barring him from office. I think they're removing him, right? In a judgment issued Tuesday morning, New Mexico District Court Judge Francis J. Matthew ruled Griffin was permanently enjoined and prohibited from seeking or holding any federal or state position, as defined by the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That includes his current position as a commissioner in Otero County, New Mexico, the judge wrote. This is crazy stuff.
Well, this had nothing to do, and again, I think they need to understand what insurrection actually means. But go back to what he actually did. He was the founder of Cowboys for Trump. And that's really what this is about. This is continual witch hunt and going after Trump, MAGA, MAGA. You're seeing this in every single thing that's playing out. And it's really about what President Trump told us a long time ago, which is that they're not after me, they're after you, I'm just in the way.
Yep. This is, I don't know if this will be upheld. I mean, I imagine it'll get appealed.
As it should.
Yeah, but the idea that they keep levying these attacks, I'm just like, guys, Civil War. Come on. They're not trying to win elections now with stuff like this. They're just trying to find a judge who's willing to bang a gavel and say, okay, fine, we removed him. They tried doing it to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's right.
They tried doing it to Madison Cawthorn. Who else did they go after on this one? Obviously.
Well, and they were successful with the establishment's help of eliminating Madison.
But that was through the primary.
100%.
They primaried him out. I'm talking about when you can't even win a primary, they go to a judge and say, just bang your gavel and say he can't be in office. And the judge went, okay.
They used to do that and seize people's property. Then there were rebellions and revolts. That Shays Rebellion was about them seizing their land. I don't know. Also taking away their ability to run for office. Man, it doesn't feel right.
So I'll tell you one of the things that I probably have people who disagree with me on this, but it's like I talk about, my mom and dad, they both have, a very colorful past and they've committed mistakes and they've had felony because of drug use and all the other things like this. But, denying people who are felons from their right to vote, you're essentially eliminating their voice. And I just don't agree with this. It's like the idea that, I have two children. I have a 17 and 7-year-old. And, it's like my 7-year-old doing something wrong. And then after I give him his punishment, me carrying that for the rest of his life. I mean, that's really what it feels like. And, this is the type of thing that I just really push back against, where you're continually, basically levied as a criminal as a result of a single crime, no matter what your actual punishment was. And the elimination of your voice or the banging of a gavel ending your capabilities to serve our nation. I mean, at some stage, we have to start looking at our justice system and how that works.
Can they stop people from running for local elections too with this stuff?
That's what it is, a local election.
That's what this
for
is.
An outside force, for like a federal force or a state governance force to tell you can't govern in your local community is way antithetical to the United States.
It's in New Mexico.
Well, it's un-American. I mean, it truly is un-American. I mean, the idea that if you commit a crime, you can never vote again. You can never have a voice again. You can, with a bang of a gavel, you can never ever serve in office again. I mean, this is
the issue is. This was a really stupid article in section in the 14th Amendment because it was obvious, and I suppose the founding fathers of the foresight, but 80 years later they did not so much. It's obvious that how do you define insurrection against the government?
Yeah, right. George Washington waged an insurrection against the king.
The point is,
happy insurrectionist.
Is January 6th
George.
an insurrection? The feds, look, there's some people who are currently charged with seditious conspiracy. I really don't believe those.
But the funniest part, do you know who the people who are indicted are? People like John Earl Sullivan, who is a very well-known BLM antagonist who basically waged a false flag. He did have an indictment.
He did?
Yes, he did.
Oh, wow.
And they did nothing with it. This is the same guy, by the way, that CNN paid for the murder of Ashley Babbitt's, footage.
He was indicted for being on there in the Capitol?
Correct.
What happened?
And he was actually in a false flag operation wearing all MAGA gear, even though he's a known BLM antagonist. I mean, this is... We have to really start understanding either we're moving past this or we're going to do a proper, not this nonsense J6 unselect committee where they wouldn't even allow true patriots in a bipartisan fashion like Congressman Jim Jordan or Congressman Jim Banks to sit on this. They picked the other two Democrats, Kinzinger and Cheney, who are both gone now. But the whole point is that, we need proper justice. We need real investigations. There is no doubt in my mind that there's a false flag operation. There's no doubt in my mind that there was some type of an FBI kind of insider, deal going on here. I mean, we have to start looking at this and really investigate. If we're going to investigate this, investigate it the real way, not from a partisan political witch hunt, but from a real, we want to get the answers.
You got to win.
But even that's partisan.
Republicans got to win in November. And then not only do they have to win, but you have to win leverage over the, establishment Republican types who are going to just sit on their hands and go, well, hold on there.
Well, and you know what's funny about this case compared to someone else? So this guy, will stick with him forever, can't run for office. He's an insurrectionist. But if you were in Kenosha that night and you burnt down 15 stores and you looted stuff and you can run for office and you can just say you were out there protesting.
And this is exactly what I talked about one time.
You were a protester at that because you believe deeply in these issues and Black Lives Matter, et cetera.
Well, it's mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah, and so one guy is an insurrectionist and who walked through the Capitol building, again, obeying those red velvet ropes.
We talked to the podium guy. I know it was a lectern.
That was great.
But everyone calls him podium guy. And his story, it's like he's a dude who walked into a building befuddled and kind of ignorantly and then moved a thing and went to prison for it. Meanwhile, you have people who romped about, set fire to buildings, throw brick through windows.
Murdered David Dorn, who was the former law enforcement chief.
I think they got that guy, though, didn't they?
Well, they did. But my point is, though, is that at the exact same time that Seattle, Minneapolis, New York, Portland, you had CHOP, you had all these things going on, which were complete lawlessness, violent rioting, looting of tens of millions of dollars, if not more, murders, rapes, all these things were going on. They justified those as protests, and you had the left who were inciting this, saying, like Maxine Waters, who were saying, well, you should get in the face of every single one of your political opponents, or, you have the others, the vice president herself, who actually created the Minneapolis, Foundation Fund, or whatever that was, the bail fund. I mean, the idea that they're actually promoting this, and then all of a sudden they want to go ahead and just because it's conservatives on one side or Democrats on the other, they want to go ahead and try and relabel this or identify this. This is the type of thing that America doesn't need.
Yeah, one of the things that also bothered me about the Biden speech, just connecting the two for a second, was the amount of the straw men, and I firmly believe that straw men are an essential tool of the Democrat Party. But multiple times he kept talking about how these MAGA people who were calling for political violence. I've never heard for anyone, except for Maxine Waters, I've never heard anyone call for. I've listened to a lot of Trump speeches. I follow a lot of these folks. I do this stuff for a living. I'm trying to find someone who has called for political violence, and yet he gave that remark so comfortably, so callously, that many of these MAGA Republicans, and then he went on
it's stochastic terrorism.
There is no use for there is no time ever for political violence, and everyone claps.
The left says,
and he even said, "Go home peacefully."
The left says that Donald Trump,
for it?
Speaking out in the way he does, is stochastic terrorism.
Yeah, that was my favorite.
And what that means is that when Trump says, I think this thing is a bad thing, he's secretly calling on his followers to go and attack that thing.
Exactly.
When Joe Biden comes out and says they're extremists, a threat to our country, and they embrace violence, what would you call that?
Yeah. But this goes back to the old idea that, remember when the king, he actually comes forward and says, can no one rid me of this petulant priest? And all of a sudden they go out and murder the priest, and they say, oh, well, you were actually the reasoning for this because you actually indirectly said this.
Right.
This is what they're trying to refer to when they try and say this about President Trump. But President Trump wasn't indirectly hinting at anything. He very clearly said, let us all go home peacefully.
But I don't mean that speech. I'm talking about in general.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm just trying to say that's what the left is trying to say, though, is that he somehow, made this into.
With Charles Manson, for instance, he told his followers, "Go F it up, go mess them up," and then they went and they killed people. Manson never said go kill people. He just said go mess it up. Trump didn't say go mess it up.
No,
he didn't tell them to go hurt anything. He said
didn't
march
incite
down
any
there.
Go
violence.
march peacefully and cheer on some politicians.
He was pretty specific about it being peaceful too.
Yep. Correct.
I just don't understand, and I also I have a great dislike for the establishment media. I just find it funny that he makes those straw man comments so comfortably, and yet no one seems curious to say, well, Mr. President, could you give us an example of who is calling for political? That is a very good and basic question the next time he ever speaks to the media. We're going on 220 days where he hasn't spoken to the media. But that is a great question. You decried MAGA Republicans calling for political violence. Could you cite an example of a MAGA Republican calling for political violence?
Well, he couldn't.
Of course not.
But no one will ever ask him that question. They will ask him, like, Mr. President, when you're eating vanilla ice cream, how does that make your tummy feel?
How do you ask the president right now? The office has no responsibility to reply to any questions.
Cold, man, come on.
Which is a problem.
Well, he doesn't take questions, and that's the whole point. He goes up there, he reads from teleprompters as his handlers tell him,
Shuffles off.
and then he shuffles off and mysteriously shakes hands of people who don't actually exist.
I got some questions. So you're coming into Congress, right? You won the primary. That's basically the race. It's an R+ district, so you got it. You think, right?
Well, I don't take anything for granted, but yes,
Oh gosh,
the
he's
majority
already a
of my race.
politician. Listen to that. Oh, boy. I'm joking. I'm joking.
I just don't believe in taking my foot off the gas.
I'm joking.
So it would be the first time you'd hold federal office.
I've never run in my life.
What do you want to do? What do you think you can do once you get in?
Well, I want to bring awareness to the real issues. I want to actually bring real solutions to things. I want to understand the fact that the America First agenda doesn't make you a racist or a xenophobe when you just want to secure your borders, protect your children, get our military back to its original strength, stop these endless wars, stop looking at the insider trading that's going on within politics, call balls and strikes on both sides. I mean, look, we have to understand that the deep state and swamp, whether that's left or right, are all involved. And we know this. We have to stop the corruption. We have to actually identify what the corruption is. That's why, in mind, very much like President Trump, like I'm donating 100% of my salary back into my actual district selected by my constituents to a woman, child, or veteran charity. The other thing is that myself, my wife, and anyone who wants to work in my office cannot buy, sell, and trade stocks while we're in office. This is not about political enrichment. This is about serving the people. And no one understands about serving the people more than the actual military who went out and was willing to die when they swore that oath. And our oath doesn't expire just because we take off that uniform. This is really about making sure that we get back to what it is to be a true constitutionalist, be a true conservative, understand physical responsibility, understand the significance of energy independence, and knowing that we cannot, I'm a business owner. I am about job creation. And guess what? Government doesn't create jobs. They stifle, they overregulate, and they actually prevent jobs. We need to empower the private sector. We need to understand the 10th Amendment and understanding state and individual rights. These are the things that I stand for. And at the end of the day, I'm an employee of the 7th District of Florida. I am not the one who gets elected by the people and then thinks that the party somehow put me into office. So I'm all about, and I have a couple of bills that I want to pass in my first 100 days. And one of the bills that I really like is called the Publishing House Bill. One of the things I want to look at is that I don't believe in impeding upon state rights. And Governor Ron DeSantis has done the K through right parental rights bill, which I think is phenomenal. But I think from a federal issue, one of the things that we should be looking at, holding the publishing houses accountable, like the McGraw-Hills or anyone else, who is intentionally publishing pornographic or inappropriate material with the intent of distribution to underage inappropriate material to children that are the age of 6 and 7 years old. We also need to start thinking about the days when I grew up, where if I went to my grandmother would drop me off to the movies and give me $20 and I'd have to go in and they'd say, how old are you? Oh, I'm 13. Okay, here's the movies that you can buy and here's the ratings. Why can't we put books that have actual ratings on it, a G rating, a PG-13 rating, etc., so that our parents who work all day long, who don't have time to proofread all of these books, can go ahead and say, you know what, this is within your age group. Now, I'm not saying we should ban books. You can publish as many books as you want. But I'm saying that you should not and cannot basically distribute these to an actual underage or youth in our libraries. And if you do, it should be a felonious offense. You should register as a sex predator for the rest of your life.
Well, are you talking about imagery or are you talking about
both?
Descriptors. So I have,
and it doesn't matter even if you try and make it an anime or you're trying to make it a cartoon. I mean, look at Genderqueer, for example, which actually shows oral sex, and that's supposed to be third grade appropriate.
If they're describing it, that would be like, you don't want like even textual descriptions.
But my whole point is that whether you actually write it in text or you actually show it in, the figure, it's the exact same thing.
So my question is, there are parts of the Bible that are explicit and talk about sex. Should that be restricted from schools?
But haven't they already banned the Bible from being in schools? I mean, I had a young kid the other day, for example. He was 14 years old, and he said, you know what I wish I could have? I wish I just had the right to be able to go ahead and pray and to be able to read the Bible in school. And he said, my teachers have actually banned me from being able to do so.
Pull up on his phone
outside of the fact that they already do, for the most part, restrict Bibles, do you think that in the same context, the Bible would be inappropriate for young kids to read?
No, I don't think of the Bible.
Ezekiel
no, I don't.
23:20.
But I think the whole point is though, shouldn't that be up to the parents to be able to go ahead and make these things? Shouldn't it actually be parental rights and not actually just the teachers' unions who are saying this is the curriculum we're going to speak? And again, going back to how Joe Biden calls, everyone who's MAGA or America First extremists. Now you've got these actual teachers' unions who are actually saying that if you're a parent who doesn't want certain things to be taught to your children, you're now a domestic terrorist. I mean, this is the type of thing, and this is only one of many bills. I mean, one of the biggest bills I want to look at right now is the banning of purchase by foreigners to buy up our farmlands, especially China. I mean, this is something that's really important to me because we have to understand this economic resource warfare and the fact that our farmlands and our actual, residences are being bought up by China, Russia, and other nations who are trying to stop affordability and availability of housing, who are trying to prevent the actual, growth of our actual domestic products when it comes to our agricultural sector, things like this. I mean, there's a law, and Indiana just passed this law actually last year where they actually ban foreign ownership of their farmlands. There's so many things that we have to write on this ship. And that's, part of the reason why I'm running is to try and make sure that we're prioritizing America over foreigners, American energy over foreign oil, our borders over Ukrainian borders, our veterans over illegals, and our children over teachers' unions.
If you could give a congressman something, I don't know.
Well, I just want to wrap up that point on the explicit nature of explicit depictions in the Bible. The meme verse is Ezekiel 23:20 that talks about the size of the man that the woman liked and the emissions of the man and things like that. And I think my view on it is, parents should be absolutely, especially with the Bible, like teaching their kids about what they find to be appropriate. And the issue with the schools is they're keeping it a secret from the parents.
Well, but Sunday school taught something totally different than what you learned when you were. So I can remember going to school, for example, or going to when I was younger, Sunday school, where my grandparents would go into the main hall, and then we kind of went into the children's area, and we would learn things like David and Goliath, or
exactly.
It should be up to the parent when their actual child are taught these things. I mean,
it should be
that's the whole
the
point of the birds and the bees story. It should be taught by the parents. It should never be taught. When I grew up, look, there is no. I hate when people say there's an over sexualization of children. No, there should be no sexualization of children. That should be left up to the parental rights. That should be left up to the actual parents on when they feel that their children are ready to hear certain things. This is why, for example, that when I would deploy to to combat, I wouldn't explain what my job is or what I've done in war to my wife the same way I would explain to my 6-year-old, for example.
Yeah.
There's a time in choosing.
And the issue is when the teacher does without your consent or knowledge and keeps it a secret and says, don't tell your parents. Like if a teacher went to a kid and said, your father is a murderer and he goes around and he does this, that, or otherwise, and they don't tell your parents I told you this, it's a problem. The parents have a right to know. So anyway, I ask because I think, for some of this material that they want to show kids, when the parents deem it appropriate at their discretion, not the schools doing it in secret and keeping it from the parents, be it any kind of explicit depiction.
See, and I think that we shouldn't even have this in the school system because then no matter how woke the teacher is, they don't have the materials in the schools to actually teach from to begin with. And that's why I looked at the Publishing House bills for that exact reason.
But I mean, again, that's why I asked the question, like, do you think the Bible should be out of public schools?
I don't actually.
But then the Bible has depictions in it as well.
No, understood. But it should be one of those things where I think that the individual parent should have a right to be able, again, I go back to what I was talking about with the Sunday school versus sitting in the actual main hall. You learn two different things.
Other materials that are like woke or whatever.
I'm not telling you that should be taught by the teachers. But should that be available for students if they wanted to go and, read the Bible during their library time or whatever the case may be? Why shouldn't it be?
I think the Bible is also sometimes, there are parts of the Bible that are age appropriate, right? There are some explicit parts of the Bible. That doesn't mean you ban the book, but that doesn't mean you have to teach it to the 5-year-olds. Even
right.
we don't but the 5-year-olds know that Jesus carried the cross, but they don't have to watch the Passion of the Christ. Right? I mean, like you can get the point across without having to get into the nail actually went through. Like, whoa, the kid's 5.
If the parents say, I would like this teacher to teach my child about the Bible, which includes all of it in terms,
we can edit selective parts out. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, then the same would
because
be true.
the kid's not appropriate.
The same would be true for
it's not appropriate.
Explorations of like I don't want to say explicitly genderqueer because there's questions about ideology, but a book that includes coming of age sexual discussions, you could argue it should be available for the teachers, but they should avoid those topics unless the parents consent, right? Like they can read around it and say, I'm going to read to you about Billy going for a joyride in his dad's car. It was a problem. Or the story of Johnny who fought his bully.
Yeah.
But we're not going to read the part where Billy goes on his first date.
Because then every kid in the class is going to be like, we got to get the first date part. Yo, it's all about that first date part.
I don't understand the moral difference then between allowing them to just grab the Bible and laugh and point to the depictions of the horse-sized male girth. You know what I mean?
Can you show me where in the Bible that actually is?
Ezekiel 23:20 is
no, but my point is that there is no actual like photo of these.
That's
types
why
of
I
things,
asked you
right?
if textual text depictions were.
Well, I think that definitely has to do with something when it comes to age group. Obviously, I mean, I don't see that many second graders running to the Bible, unfortunately. But I mean, when you talk about
second graders, I don't know, but eighth
here's my
graders, yes.
but here's my point though.
we did when I was a kid. Everybody grabbed it and pointed
but
to
my
it.
reason in saying that is that when you have something which is like genderqueer, for example, which is in cartoon fashion.
Right.
You are actually building that with the idea of trying to encourage some of the youth to be able to go and at least look at the photos of these things that are going on.
That's why I'm
Imagery is
asking,
dangerous
like,
because
imagery is very dangerous.
A 3-year-old can see the imagery and get
That's
twisted.
yes, I agree with that.
You don't
Right,
need to
which is why I'm
read and
asking
write.
if like textual depictions are comparable to image, but I think it's fairly obvious images can be substantially worse.
Correct.
I'm also curious as to what the lesson is that the teacher is trying to get across. Like, and I feel gross. I'm not going to lie. It feels like you're committing a crime.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.